Hey guys, what's up? So I've been watching this Lord of the Rings kind of spin-off thing. It's Lord of the Rings, but it's not any of the Tolkien stories. It's a new Lord of the Rings story, which is the kind of thing I really like because just showing the same story over and over again, it doesn't, it's always good to add to the story. It's always good to keep the universe you've created with the story that you're telling and create fresh new stories based on that universe. And I think Lord of the Rings did that. And this was Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, right? So this is pretty cool. This is the first season. I don't know if there are going to be additional seasons. It looks like they're planning additional seasons because the series doesn't end after the season. And it just goes on and on. And this is 8 episodes, and in this edition was like 4 discs, and each disc had 2 episodes. And so Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. So I'm assuming this is like a non-Tolkien. Obviously, I don't think Tolkien's around anymore to write Rings of Power, and I don't think Tolkien ever wrote Rings of Power unless he did, and it was just a lesser, known story. But I don't think he did. I think this is a spin-off of Lord of the Rings because it was so successful. They want to continue it. It's sort of like when Conan the Barbarian came out. They wanted to make continuations in that world. And even if the story wasn't called Conan the Barbarian, there were so many movies made in that world. In fact, Hercules' Legendary Journeys is like, you could say it was the same world. It's the same sword and sorcery kind of like epic, or even Xena Warrior Princess was in that kind of like Conan the Barbarian world. It's not a stretch. But what they did was they kept the world. They just added to it, and this is the same thing. I mean, you got the elves, you got the dwarves. Basically, this is mostly elves and dwarves in this. There's also hobbits in this, which were pretty cool. I mean, they were true to what Lord of the Rings kind of brought up. But the story was not about the hobbits. Like in Lord of the Rings, the story is basically the protagonist, the center. The hero of the story is the hobbit in that story. But this one, the hero of the story is an elf. And basically, there's a lot of things going on in this story. And I think what they did was they used the season 1 to really set the story up where they're going to go somewhere with this story. It really didn't go. It's very, very slow. And it just like moves and everything like that. But the beauty of the cinematography, the beauty of the art direction, the acting and the directing and how everything was put together, it's really a nice looking story. You could tell they spent a lot of money on it because they were like, hey, this is Lord of the Rings. Here's the budget. I'm pretty sure a lot of people decided that they wanted to invest in a Lord of the Rings like story. So when they were like funding it, when they were like, who's going to put money into it and invest in our movie? A lot of people said, I will do that because of the success of Lord of the Rings, the 3 stories and whatever, in The Hobbit. And this is the same thing that kind of like Star Wars did, which was like they built their universe in episode 4, 5, and 6, and then they continued it. I think that like making the prequels was a good idea to make one prequel, but making the prequel into 3 episodes so you can like you kind of like legitimize the fact that the first episode, which was the first episode, was the 4th episode in Star Wars. Just to legitimize that, they went through 3 movies. They could have just been like, okay, here's the prequel. They could have been Star Wars the prequel, and it could have just like summarized it. I think a movie being a prequel of Star Wars would have been a lot more successful than 3 movies, the Clone Wars and all that stuff. Would have been better for it because it would just explain where everything is going, and a lot more would happen. Darth Vader would go from Anakin to Vader. All this stuff would happen. Obi-Wan would go from where he was and like old Yoda and stuff like that, and they would explain, where the Emperor came from and how he is connected to the Force and things like that. I think that would have been a better idea. And so this is what they did. And what's honestly, like, I heard bad reviews for this thing. I really did. Like, I heard, but it was like more of a rumor than a review. It was like, it was, they were like saying, oh, it wasn't good, whatever it was. It's good. It's enjoyable to watch. And a big part of that is the actors, a big part of that is the art direction, a big part of that is the budget, the special effects, how everything looked. It was very beautiful. It was very pretty. And so you can see, like, here's the cover of the DVD set, and then there's like, you open it up and there's like a nice picture in here. Then you open it up again, and you get this. You get like a lot of like scenes from the movie and whatever, scenes from the movie. And honestly, like, when I saw this, I was like, this is interesting. I want to see it. Because I didn't see too much of the Lord of the Rings movies. I think I saw the Hobbit movie. I really didn't maybe I saw some of the Lord of the Rings movies. I really didn't get into it, and I really didn't like watch it or anything like that. It just wasn't, I just didn't do it. Like, I read most of the books. The first 2 books I read completely, and the third book in the trilogy, I read like half of it, and I was like, oh, I can't read Tolkien's writing anymore. It's clunky, and I can't read it, and it's just nothing is happening in the third book. You still have Frodo and whatever. Those, they're just fumbling about, and there's trolls, and it's like nothing really interesting was happening in that movie, in that book, and I was like, hey, you know what? It's the last book anyway, so like if I just finish reading that last book, well, the story's over anyway, so I might as well just like leave it the way it is, So this is cool. It's in the Lord of the Rings universe. There are no rings of power in this in the series, though. There are no rings of power. I just want to say that even though it's called Rings of Power, there aren't any. So I guess, in Lord of the Rings, there's the Rings of Power, right? The one ring or whatever it is, There aren't any in this book. There's a sword. It's this like little sword handle thing. And the sword handle basically turns into a real sword. There's Sauron, and this takes place, I guess that, it's a sequel. It's continuations of Lord of the Rings. Because Sauron is no longer Sauron. He's not around. He supposedly was killed, but he's not actually killed because he was in he's in this, not as the wizard incarnation of Sauron, but he's in there. He's in there, And so, because I don't want to spoil, anything, like no spoilers and stuff like that, but I do want to say that but Sauron is not there in the form of Sauron the way he was in the Lord of the Rings. Same thing with Gandalf. He's not there in the same way as the Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. I guess those 2 magicians, they were kind of destroyed, or to some degree. In Lord of the Rings, they make a comeback in this one, but not in the same way. The hobbits, there's no Frodo, there's no Bilbo. The elves are completely different. There's no Aragorn. The dwarves are, as far as I know, different and stuff like that. And while it is the Lord of the Rings universe, it is like stories that, there's already stories happening. For example, when the elf knows the dwarf, and when the elf goes to see the dwarf is like, you haven't seen me in 20 years or 30 years or something like that. That might be like, a day in an elf's life, but in a dwarf, it's a long time, And things like that. They have a history with each other. There's already like backstories happening. There's already things happening. And the thing is that like the dwarves and the elves kind of got together, but the hobbits actually didn't. And the hobbits are not necessarily. There's a couple of hobbits. Like the story's like basically the Hobbit part of there's different parts of the story. The Hobbit part of the story, they focus on the hobbits, then they focus on the elves. And then there's also the dwarves. And those are the stories that are happening, right? I don't want to like reveal anything from the series in case you haven't seen it, because it is worth watching. Like you should check it out if you get a chance. I guess it says Prime Video on it, so I'm guessing this is on Amazon Prime. You can watch this and stuff like that. But it's really nice. I like it. It basically follows a few things. Like, this is the main character. She's pretty much the main character in the elven part of the story. he's also one of the main characters in the elven part of the story, but they don't necessarily intermix because there's his story, there's her story, and then you got like, here's the dwarves, there's their story, and then you've got her, she's kind of human, and there's that story, and the humans need the help of the elves, and the dwarves are mining this metal that is going to get them to win the war over some evil power. And yeah, you got the evil forces at work. Also, you've got like all of the different, what are those guys like? They're not trolls. They're like they're monsters basically. You know, they're like the warrior. They're the warrior monsters, right? All those like golems or whatever those things are. They're like these warrior monsters that basically are evil, and they're mining metal or they're mining something in order to make weapons and take over the world. You know, so that's kind of what it's about. There's different, like, it's more like Dune than anything else. It was very, very Dune-like, more than like a Lord of the Rings story. Because the Lord of the Rings story is more like, it's an adventure, it's a quest, it's, you know, a hobbit who's a little guy, but with help of elves and dwarves and like, you know, a lot of different creatures and monsters or whatever, he's going to save the world, from evil, from Sauron. You know, he's going to use the magic ring and his sword and, you know, all the different things and magic and you know, whatever he can to defeat evil and bring the world back. With this, I think it's going somewhere. So I do want to say that it's very, very slow. I also want to say it's not a lot of action in it. There's some action in it. There's some fighting in it. But it's beautiful. It's well designed. It's very, very well, you know, the cinematography it's well shot. It's well acted. And, you know, the costumes are nice. The special effects are nice. There's dragons. There's a lot of stuff that makes it a Lord of the Rings. It's also a lot of stuff that makes it a fantasy series, you know, a good one too. And here we go. And these are the hobbits. So you got the hobbit there. So you've got like the hobbit story, and then you've got the elf story, then you got like the dwarves. All of this, they kind of build the world up. And I guess what they're doing is they're trying to band together like any way they can. Like the humans and the elves and the dwarves or whatever are trying to band together to conquer basically Sauron's forces. Even though Sauron is not in the same form and not like there as this evil wizard, his forces are there. You know, his forces are still there. The monsters that they create to fight for them, the monster army, right? Whatever that is, I think Gorgons. I don't even know what you call them, but they're basically monster armies, you know, and they are trying to take over the world. And a lot of time, and without the help of the dwarves, the elves feel like they're going to be defeated, you know. So that's the thing about it. And the humans are trying to help the elves, and the elves are trying to help the humans. All this stuff. It's that kind of thing. It's Middle Earth trying to band together to conquer Sauron's forces, right? But what's interesting about it is that like there's a lot of like things that happen in the story. I think it's a continuation. It's sort of like it goes on to where Lord of the Rings left off. It's the next day or the next few years, and everything is different. Like, you know, and things just come to light. Like you don't know who Sauron is. You don't know who Gandalf is. You don't know any of the characters. There's no Frodo. There's no Bilbo. There's none of the characters you know, except for Sauron, except for Gandalf. That's pretty much the only two actual characters that are still in the story. And the elves are different, the dwarves are different, everyone else is different as far as I know, because I'm not really that familiar with the dwarves in Lord of the Rings. I don't know if they kept them the same. I don't think so. I think that they really changed the dwarves and made them different, you know. And it's cool, you know. See, if you look over here, it's like, beginning in a time of relative peace, we follow an ensemble cast of characters as they confront the emergence of evil to Middle-earth. From the darkest depths of the Misty Mountains to the majestic forest of Lindon to the breathtaking island kingdom of Numenor, to the farthest reaches of the map, these kingdoms and characters will carve out legacies that live on long after they are gone. So that's basically what that is. It's the story after Lord of the Rings ends. And it's none of the characters except for the two magicians, the two wizards. Those are the only characters that you're going to find in this. The rest of it is new, it's fresh, it's different. The world is the same. You got the elves, you got the dwarves, but the actual characters, the actual stories, everything is different. It's a continuation. The plots are similar because it's the same thing. You know, Sauron's forces are trying to take over Middle-earth. And then the elves and the dwarves and all the, you know, the humans or whatever, they're all trying to save it. You know, but there are no rings of power in this one. In fact, there's no rings at all. You know, there is a magic sword. And it's pretty cool. So I would say, like, you know, of course, I would say yes, if you like Lord of the Rings, check it out. But I would say, like, anyone that likes sword and sorcery or medieval fantasy should check it out. You know, because it's a fun story, but it's not like thrilling. It's not like a lot of action happening. You know, it's not like as good as a great series, but I think it's worth watching. I think it's interesting. I think it's beautiful, and I like it. I think like you would enjoy this if you like medieval fantasy. You would enjoy this if you like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I think it's definitely something you want to check out. You know, even though it's like it's not that. Like, it's not a lot of action. It's not a lot of that suspense. But there is fighting, and there is magic, and there is like a lot of stuff that's happening in the universe, you know, in that universe. And it's a fun ride. It's very, very short. It's only 8 episodes. And it would be nice if there were more episodes, right? It would be nice if there was more to it, but I could see like how much money they put into this. You know, how the scenes looked and the cinematography and everything like that. That's what's interesting, and that's what keeps you engaged. That's what keeps you interested in it. The cinematography, the way things look, it's beautiful. It's like the elves and their armor and their clothing, their hair, you know, those things, you know, the queens, the kings, the palaces, and all the cities and things like that. It was well designed. It was a lot of good art direction. I would say the artists they made it an art movie, because everything is artistically done, from the cinematography to the backgrounds, to the decorations, to the clothing, the costuming, to the special effects. There's a dragon, you know, there's monsters, there's that thing happening, and it's an interesting thing to watch, and I think it's definitely like required to watch it. Like, you should watch it. You should check it out if you get a chance. But I'm not saying you expect something amazing and great, right? But I would say, like, expect something good that you will enjoy, you know, pretty much. But what's interesting, but I did hear that it wasn't that great. Like, I heard a lot of people, so the people didn't like it, and I would say no, it's good. You know, I liked it. I thought it was cool, you know. But I didn't watch Lord of the Rings as much. I think I saw some of it. I definitely like saw The Hobbit. I saw the cartoon Hobbit back in the day or whatever. I did actually watch The Hobbit, but I didn't really get into The Lord of the Rings too much. I don't even remember if I saw the movies, you know, because they came out like a while ago. I don't know. I'm not sure. But the thing is, at that point when the movies came out, I already read the books, so I knew already what was happening, and I didn't know it was actually a really good movies, because a lot of people liked the movies. They were like, no, these are great. So I just never got a chance to see them, and I never really pursued it, since I already knew the story and what was going to happen, right? Except like for the actual end, and I was like, whatever. I kind of know what happens anyway, you know? I kind of hear, you know, people talking about, oh, this happened, you know? And so that there was that. I like the fact that they created Rings of Power. I like the fact that they're continuing the story of the Lord of the Rings, you know? I like that. Would it be nice if they put the original, more of the same characters in it? I don't know. Like, that's the thing about this story is, you know, Middle Earth is a world, and it has been built. You know, it's been built, and so you could do a lot with that. You can use the same characters and continue their story, or you can just create new characters and just keep the world. You don't have to do it that way. Like any way, like the art, you know, the writer's idea of what they want to show, I think either way would be fine. You know, yeah, of course you can do more, you know, Bilbo and Frodo and all that, or you could just create new characters and stuff like that. So that would be just as good. And so it's good, and I don't think that like it's not necessarily, it doesn't feel necessarily like Lord of the Rings, and even though it's in that world, it feels different and new, and I like that about that. It doesn't feel like Lord of the Rings. It doesn't feel like the books. It doesn't feel like the movies. It feels like they did something new and different with that. They kept the world. They're continuing to build the world. It's built in the world, but it's nice that they did something new and different that doesn't feel like Lord of the Rings. If this was done, if they didn't tell you this was Lord of the Rings, they could have easily made its own movie series. It could have easily made its own series if they didn't use elements of Lord of the Rings. If they didn't use the same, like the elves, they were like, yeah, they kind of looked like they were in Lord of the Rings, but also they could have not been in Lord of the Rings, but they did call the place Middle Earth, and they did have, and then there was Sauron, and there was like Gandalf and stuff like that. But that's the thing, this could have been a continuation of Middle Earth, or if you just got rid of the inferences or the connections to, if you just got rid of the connections that it has in the series to Lord of the Rings, it could have been its own series. If they just changed the words around, they didn't call it Middle Earth, they didn't call it like Sauron, whatever, it could have been its own series. And it could have been, and the world was different enough from the actual movies and the books that, that it didn't have to be Lord of the Rings spinoff. It could have been its own thing, right? It could have been its own thing. So, yeah, so let me know if you guys saw this or whatever. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in another video later.